Welcome, everyone, to our first episode of our Executive Excellence webinar series. We're going to have a Q&A at the end, so keep track of your questions. We look forward to answering them. I am Crystal Peterson, the CEO of STG, and I am here today with Mel Tingy, our Chief Technology and Strategy Officer.
Hello.
And with Brad Fisher, the CEO of the Scalable Leadership Group. Thank you so much for joining me today, you guys.
Glad to be here.
This webinar series is for executives and leaders. It's something that we're going to host every other month, and we're going to focus on change. Change is something that impacts all of us. It impacts our markets, it impacts our organizations, it impacts us individually. And we are going to be able to bring on different guest executives and thought leaders and explore change with them and how they're navigating it and leading through it. Our goal is that anyone who participates will be able to have actionable takeaways. Today, for our first episode, we are going to zoom in on the nature of change and specifically how technology is accelerating the transformations that we're seeing. In Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, he talks about how technology, when used correctly, is an accelerator. And on the other side of that,
go up or you can go down.
If you don't use it correctly,
Right.
it hurts and it holds you,
Yeah.
not just holds you back,
It
but
can
sends you the
kill
other
you,
way.
right.
Yes. So we're going to discuss what rapid change looks like, why it's happening, and what our role is as leaders in leading through that. So, Brad, I'm going to have you start us off. You are very passionate about this topic, and you've shared so many interesting things with me throughout the years, and I'd love for you to kick us off in talking about the nature of change.
Well, thank you. First of all, I'm so excited to be here. This is wonderful. I've been, you could say, passionate or semi-passionate about the concept of change ever since I was a teenager. I remember almost the exact moment that I became aware of this. I was thinking one day, and this is going to sound funny, but I'll tell you the story. I was thinking about my grandfather. This was a long time ago, back in the mid 70s, early 70s. And it suddenly occurred to me one day, my grandfather was born in 1899. And I thought about his life from 1899 up to those early 70s days. And I thought to myself, wow, just imagine what he has seen in his lifetime. The commercialization of the radio, the invention and commercialization of the automobile. It was invented a few years before he was born, but really didn't hit the street until he was born. The airplane in 1903, television, and radar, and then the computer came along, and then we went to the moon. I thought to myself, he was so lucky, and here I am sitting here as a 14-year-old kid in 1974 or whatever, and all the change was done. Everything had been invented. I thought the rest of my life was going to be so boring.
I'm
But
so glad
of
you were
course, was
wrong.
I ever wrong? I'm wrong a lot, including then. But I really can't even fathom how things have changed, and who would have ever thought of the cell phone back then. I guess we were watching Star Trek and they had their communicators, but it's just astounding to me. And one of the ways I like to look at this, I read a book, my uncle wrote a book around a topic called Calusia, which if anybody's ever interested, just pop it in the chat. I'll tell you all about it. It's wonderful. It's a history of technology. And then more recently, I read another wonderful book years ago by Ray Kurzweil, who it was called The Singularity is Near. Now he just came out with another one called The Singularity is Nearer. And I'm reading that literally right now. And then this guy, Yuval Harari, wrote a wonderful series of books, starting with a book called Sapiens. And all three of them referred to the history of humankind as if it all happened in one year. And I want to just show you that. You may have seen it before, and I'm not going to belabor it, but it's kind of fun. Alan, our friend Alan there, will you shift to the slides for me? So if you look at human history, it begins in old Stone Age in the Paleolithic era, 2.5 million years ago. But basically, recent or more modern starts at about 10,000 years ago. And, I'll just give you a chance to look at that slide, read some of the words. I'm not going to read it to you, but there are these era of mankind that we have gone through. It's astounding to think about that and to think about the rate of change. And it's kind of natural for someone to look at that as, technology on the left side, the vertical line, and time on the right. It goes up and to the right, and we could argue about the slope. Is change happening slower or faster? But really, what's important is it's not a straight line at all. And if we look at that history that I mentioned earlier and put some dates behind it, starting with day one, January 1st, and the beginning of the Neolithic era, then almost a whole half a year goes by before we hit the Bronze Age. Very, very little change. And then the Iron Age happens quite a while after that. And really the change that has really hit mankind happened in the last week and even the last days of the year. And it's just astounding to see that. And I like to, instead of having the graph look like this, what we really should do is think about what happened in each of those time periods. Is this working for you
Oh
guys?
yeah,
I just
this is
love this.
fascinating.
Yeah, and if you look at what happened in the Stone Age, basically it's nothing. I put a little bit of slope on that line just so you could see it, but it's essentially flat. And then the Bronze Age ticked things up a little bit faster, and then the Iron Age, we started to move. We started to have more sophisticated tools, urban centers, writing and math started to come into the world. In the Middle Ages, things progressed. The early modern, around the 1700s, and then the industrial age, 1760, I believe, was when the steam engine was invented. That really kicked us up. And then look at what happened in
Wow.
1945. Holy moly. Can you just look at that for a second and see the kind of change, and I feel like I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I was envious of my grandfather, but if you just look at the last week of the human year,
Well,
um,
even the last couple hours, like you're showing
yeah,
here.
yeah, the World Wide Web happened on December 29th, almost December 30th, and since then, just blasted through the iPhone, and Chat GPT is just turning the world on its head. And it's astounding. I'll just say one more thing that I find fascinating. ChatGPT 2 was much more powerful. And that's really when ChatGPT became commercialized. That's when I first saw it. ChatGPT 3 was hundreds of times more powerful, not twice as powerful, hundreds of times. ChatGPT 4 was thousands of times more powerful than ChatGPT 3, only separated by a few months. ChatGPT 5, I don't know, could it be billions of times more? When you think about the implications, and I like to think about what happened when Tim Berners-Lee helped us commercialize the World Wide Web 30 years ago, 34 years ago. ChatGPT's only been around for a year, or
Yeah.
a couple. It's just like astounding. So I just wanted to set the stage for us because the rate of change is tremendous. That fire hose is hitting us in the face, and we have to be able to cope with that. We have to be able to survive and even thrive as business people. So that's
Wow.
thanks for
Wow.
giving me the chance to be part of this
I
because
love
it's
this.
just fantastic.
Brad, I mean, it's incredible to see that change and see it put in that way. It's happened so rapidly, and to see it accelerating at that level, it's a little overwhelming, I'd say. It's cool to see. How do you think that these changes are going to shape the future for us?
Well, I like to think, of course, just think about it in the terms, let's say for business, that's really the theme of this webinar series. And I just like to think about how is this going to affect us? First of all, I would say that what's really critical is that our job as leaders is to really simplify and streamline. And I'll go into that more. But we owe it to our people to help them cope with this change, help them understand it. And some of the dimensions that occur to me, first of all, each one of you, I would say, just think for a moment about your customers. Think about who they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and think about who they are today.
Mm.
They have access to all of this technology just like you do. Their expectations are extremely high. They're not going to wait around for us to catch up with technology. They're going to move from your web page to somebody else's, from our web page to somebody else's. So think about the implications for for your customers. Think about the implications for your employees. They too have access to all the information, including what everybody else is getting paid and working from home and flexibility and all these things that are driving employers crazy today. That's a direct result of, accelerated by the pandemic, but the direct result of the technology change.
Mm.
And so how do we use the modern tools to our advantage instead of being crushed by them? How do we move forward and use that? What does that mean for our privacy? What kind of products can be possible today? What kind of products and services and even jobs will be shut down because of these changes? Those are the things that I like to,
and what will be created.
that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting to think. And I think to speak to that, Mel, new materials, things we haven't even thought of yet, and nanomaterials, synthesized materials, new energy sources, nuclear fusion, not just nuclear fission, and the new energy, renewable energy. We were talking about this
Yeah.
the other day. It's 13 non-petroleum based and non-hydroelectric is now 13%. Just
It's
a few
fascinating.
short years ago, solar by itself is 4.5%
Mhm.
of energy. Just imagine that, and the access to clean water and food, and just don't get me started. And then the processing speed and
We actually
the
do want to get you
computer
started.
I think we did get him started.
And then think about medicine and genetics. Like
Mhm.
in 10 years, my grandfather is going to be spinning in his grave with all the change that he missed.
And laughing that
Yeah,
you
right.
thought life was going to be so boring.
How ironic. Anyway,
Well, Brad,
does that answer your question,
yes,
Crystal?
the pace of change is not only accelerating, but it's changing how we think. It's changing how we plan. It's changing how we lead.
Yeah.
And so, Mel, you're our Chief Technology and Strategy Officer. So I know you monitor a lot of these trends and you know how they're impacting us as businesses. Because as you said, Brad, this is about business.
Mhm.
And so I would love to hear from you. What are some of the prominent change vectors that you're seeing?
Yeah, thanks, Crystal. First off, I think it's great we've put this series together. I really applaud both of you for the work you've done in kind of organizing this, and I think for business leaders across the spectrum, at even different levels, I think this is going to end up being a series that's going to be worth your time and worth getting to know peers and people in the community to really help, because that's really where a lot of this support comes from, is kind of helping each other to understand how to deal with and manage change. I love what you said, Brad, and a lot of times as leaders we just feel like we're on our heels. We feel like we're just surviving, and the objective of what we really want to accomplish is to actually move forward, to be more proactive, more intentional, and to actually begin to thrive and to move that forward in that way. Let's advance the slide here. Alan, thank you. Really appreciate what Alan does for us behind the scenes. Wish you guys could get to know him. He's
Cracks
just
the whip
awesome.
on us.
Absolutely. So
Tells me my mic is too far away all the time.
to build off of what you were saying, Brad, if we pick up where you kind of left off, I want to really hone in on the advances that's happened over the last 35 years. I'm old and I've been through a lot of these.
I think
different
people can
periods.
see by how we all look. We're all old
Yeah.
here.
the gray in my beard, and I've been pulling my hair out for years. So, anyway, when we think about these major technology periods that have occurred over the last 35 years, I'm not going to go through these in great deal, but these first few, when IBM invented the 8088 computer, that was actually my first computer. I was 14 years old. We bought it in our home. It was my step into really becoming a geek, which I love.
We had the Commodore 64.
Commodore 64, awesome.
An Apple.
Apple. But this was the computer that entered into business. It entered into the business world. Companies that were forward thinking really recognized that putting a computer on the desk of each employees that worked in various positions allowed them to be more efficient. Just that transition from a typewriter to a word processor was a huge step forward, to not have to, rip up a piece of paper, wad it up and throw it away. They could make changes, edit, review, and then reprint. And just that level of efficiency was astounding. You fast forward in the 90s, we saw organizations, mid-market and larger, really embrace modern ERP systems, managing their financials, managing human capital management, payroll, all those different things that just created so much operational overhead prior to ERP systems. I entered the workforce during the next period, in the early 90s. I saw the internet browser invention, Mosaic. I remember working for a company
Yeah.
here in Utah.
Mark Andreessen.
Mark
Yeah,
Andreessen and
right.
Tim Berners-Lee. I mean,
Mhm.
that was right when I was in college and working for Morton International, the airbag company in Ogden. And what I saw there was happening across the board in business, where leaders were grappling with, do we give our employees open access to the internet? Can we trust them? Will it distract them? Will they become, less productive? And there was a lot of tension around that for quite a few years. It wasn't until around the 2005 timeframe that companies finally capitulated and said, no, we just need to allow our employees to have access. That largely happened because smaller, more nimble companies that had younger employees were beating them. They were working better, faster, cheaper because they had access. They weren't wasting their time on the internet. They were using it to their advantage.
Sounds familiar to us, lines up with some of the things we see even today.
Even
Yeah,
today, even today,
definitely.
exactly.
Same dynamics.
Smartphones. I was a big BlackBerry user. I loved that tactile feel of the keyboard.
Click, click. Yeah.
So for me, it was kind of a sad thing that they misstepped and really got beat out by iOS, by iPhone and Android. But we're so fortunate. We have so much power in our hands, sometimes too much power, that it's just amazing how much access to information we have and how quickly we can communicate and update and learn and respond. It's just amazing.
I learned a really interesting fact. 86% of the people on the planet Earth have a smartphone.
That's amazing.
86%.
Yeah.
7 billion people have smartphones. That means every continent, Europe, North America, South America, Africa.
Wow.
Isn't that astounding?
That is amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Wow. I'm sorry to
No,
interrupt you,
no, I
but
love it.
couldn't resist.
This is a great conversation. I want to just kind of move forward in the context of these eras all the way to AI. We are sitting right now with the same type of conversation happening in business that occurred back when the internet came. We have organizations that are super scared. We have employees that are wondering if their jobs are going to go away. We have executives grappling with, what do we do? How do we do it? It's super confusing. What are the implications of it? And I predict that what we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years are companies that will literally start from ground zero, embracing AI, that will become major market disruptors.
Mhm.
If you've read Clayton
Of course.
Christensen's book, The Innovator's Dilemma,
Mhm.
we're going to
Love that
see
book.
that happen in the next
Yeah.
10
I
years.
feel like we're already seeing that happen.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's true.
NVIDIA,
It's true.
Mhm.
But I think that, the nature of, even like you said, Brad, how quickly AI is advancing, I don't think we can even fathom the kind of impact it's going to have. And what I really want to hone in on as leaders, we sit in all different spectrums on this graph. And what we're seeing is companies today that are, mid-market, 500 million, 700 million in revenue, that haven't done the big ERP implementation.
I'm
They're
astounded by that, but it's true.
it's
Yeah.
true. We know, based on tons and tons of survey data, that small to medium-sized companies, it's like 80% do not even have a technology strategy. They're not intentional. They're not forward thinking around how technology is going to accelerate and move them forward. And so what we're going to also see going forward is we're going to see AI play a pretty big part in helping organizations leapfrog some of these past mistakes that they've made, kind of the payment of that technical debt. They'll be able to take advantage of some of the advances and step over some of the mistakes that other people have made. They can step right into a more modern approach to things.
But I think to what you're saying there, you going back to the internet, you put yourself in the shoes of some of these bigger companies that aren't embracing it and are still have other things they need to embrace. And, there's that balance between, that step forward and the risk that comes, especially with, we're definitely past even with ERP, there's risk when we talk about doing technology wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you suggest for organizations as they're balancing that risk before something new like AI, embracing that and staying ahead without and managing that risk as well?
That's a great question. We're going to talk a little bit later about some of that. The one thing I want to point out now in relation to that question is the human element of change. And it really is astounding that for all that we know about how leaders should lead, how they should be, empathetic and compassionate and really, see their people in ways that, honor their humanity, we still have tons and tons of major decisions being made in the boardroom, in the executive room, where then coming out of those decisions, they're just expecting the employees to line up, salute, and move forward. And because change is always challenging, the real changes that will occur in organizations are always best done when the employees, the people, are a part of that change, where they're engaged, their hearts and minds are right there in recognizing the value of decisions that are being made and moving forward. So it's kind of an answer to the first part of your question. The other part with regard to risk, we're going to talk about in here in a little bit. So
Love it.
we'll hang on a second.
Well, I love what you're saying there because, it's not only do we need to understand the forces driving all of this transformation, but we need to be strong and adaptive leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Brad, you're a leadership coach. Could you talk to us a little bit about what you see the role of leaders is in all of this?
Sure. And as you called yourself a geek, I'd say I'm the business nerd in this group, maybe.
I'm proud to be both of us.
Right. So the first thing to mention, and this is a statement of the obvious, but it's infinite complexity right now. And this pace of change is just driving. If sitting in the CEO seat where you sit, Crystal, you've literally got millions of variables, maybe arguably billions of variables to balance and optimize. And how the heck do you make that happen? That is the first job of a leader, one of the skills or superpowers that you need to develop. You need to be able to simplify so that you can grapple with and cope with it. When I compare that to the medicine, to medical technology, the human body has 602 muscles. It has miles and miles of blood vessels. If you lined them all up, it's like 78 miles of blood vessels or something crazy. We have billions of neurons in our brains, and we have trillions, literally trillions with a T, of cells in our body. How the heck can you take something that complex and organize it? Well, that's what medical science has done. And we've, 6 muscle groups in our body. We've got, things sectioned off. We've got specialties. That's what a CEO and other leaders in companies need to do. They need to be able to take that and understand it. And just a little foreshadowing, I love the strategic technology framework that you've created that helps me and other business people understand. If we're civilians like I am around technology, it's like, how do I organize? How do I know if I'm on track or not? So I salute you for that. And that's number one. Number two is you have to take that simplicity, that through line, and you have to be able to comfort your people and help them deal with ambiguity, because that, like you said, Crystal, people are afraid, people are confused. Your job as a leader is to see that through line like a skier going down a mountain, and to be able to communicate that, to be able to provide direction, fundamental mission related, vision related, core values and guiding principles, all of the North Star, or lighthouse, whatever metaphor you want to use. That's another thing. And you have to be able to balance the right amount of transparency and flexibility, and a mindset of proactive versus reactive, so that you can make good decisions. I could talk all afternoon about that, but that's sort of some of the beginnings. And like you mentioned, Mel, it's also about supporting those individual people and the group itself with listening, with empathy. People want to be heard, they want to be understood, and it all has to happen in that context of tremendous tornado level change.
Uh, that all resonates so much with me. I've been with STG
Yeah, you're
leading.
grappling with it yourself.
We've been around for
Mm,
almost 3 decades, and I've, been through all of these changes and market impacts with the company, and they're happening faster than ever, and they
mhm,
seem bigger each time. And so I have just seen, as we've gone through these changes, that, I love the idea that it's not just our responsibility to provide direction and clarity, but comfort.
mhm,
Um, I see that even with the best intentions and strategies that we've had, change is overwhelming and it's scary. And I've watched STG feel this push and pull between tradition and innovation, and balancing between holding on to what we know, what we're successful at, what's brought us success, and embracing new opportunities.
mhm.
I cannot tell you how unnerving it has been for us to walk away from the very things that got us here in
Yeah,
order to go somewhere else.
right.
But that's exactly what we need to do. Sometimes, we have to change
You have to
processes.
transform.
Yes,
You have to go from a caterpillar to a butterfly. It's not about faster caterpillars.
it's
It's
about,
about
yes.
yeah.
I love that.
We've changing our services
Right.
and changing roles. That one can be really scary for people. And obviously, there's part of our culture that are things that are just non-negotiable in our culture, and our value of seeing people as people,
Hmm.
and making sure
Yeah.
that we treat people the right way and bring value to people. That's never going to change for us, and we hold on to that dearly. But there have been other parts in our past that have served us so well then, and we want to hold on to them, but they're not serving us any well, and they're not serving our clients, they're not serving our employees, they're not serving the market, and we have to change. Recognizing that we need to change is hard, but I think the hardest part is taking action.
Hmm.
And it goes back to that
Courage.
human nature part of it.
Hmm.
When change is happening, it's uncomfortable. And when people are uncomfortable, you feel fear, you feel anxiety, you feel doubt. And it's not just the teams and everyone's feeling it, including the leaders at times. We're feeling
That's
those
why we're
same
doing this
feelings.
webinar series,
Yes.
and that's why we're doing the roundtable, because we need to stick together. This is
Yes.
hard.
It is
Yeah.
very
It takes
helpful
courage, and
when you're in that place to have someone help you see it and help you move past it, because I just recently, the last couple of years have been a really big market hit for us, and I'm sure we're not alone. I know we're not alone, and we've had to adjust with a lot of change, more than usual. And when people around me are unhappy and they're looking for stability, I have found myself doubting at times. And it was so critical for me to embrace a growth mindset
Mhm.
and to make that intentional choice you keep talking about, to take action, because I feel like we get this false sense of comfort that comes from inaction.
Sitting still. Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
And we have to lean into the discomfort of stepping forward without
Yeah.
certainty, and just trust that you've got the right people, you've got the right culture and mindset, you've got good partners and good tools. We're going to figure
And a
this
clear
out.
through line
Yes,
right.
we can
That's what you
figure
need.
this out. And yeah, we're going to make mistakes
Yep.
because we don't know everything and we don't see everything. But any mistake we make the impact of that is going to be far less than the mistake of the status quo.
Yeah.
Of inaction.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well said. Very well said.
One of the things I've learned is I know when I'm in the right place and the right mindset when I am being decisive and when I am being proactive, when I'm leading with confidence and clarity, when I'm making choices for the company that aren't just about protecting us right now, but helping set up our future for success. And as I've talked about that balance that we felt and the push and pull between tradition and innovation, and technology plays such a pivotal part of that because it's influencing everything that we're experiencing. And we are a technology company, yet I think about how many times we have made the mistake and have just left technology to the IT department and those serving our clients and not integrated it into our vision and our strategy and how we lead. And that's just a big mistake.
Oh, huge.
And
It's the biggest strategic weapon we have.
exactly. And as leaders, most leaders have a financial background or a sales background. Even those with a technical background, Mel, you have a strong technical expertise. And as leader, there's no way you can be on top of all that's going on in technology and do it on your own without, it's too complex.
It's too much.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think what you're saying earlier about making things simple
Yeah.
is so powerful.
That's what, that's, yeah.
There have been a lot of things that where I've been able to have a framework, a structure to help simplify something that's complex for me and make it simple. And there is so much value in that.
Comfort. So much comfort.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we've been alluding to it a lot. I feel like it's the star of, of our webinar today. Mel, you have worked with other brilliant technology leaders to put together our strategic technology framework. And I know that you've been able to use that and help other leaders use it. And I would love for you to share that technology framework with us and how leaders can use that to integrate technology into our business strategies.
Yeah, I'd love to share. Alan, will
Thank you.
share the slides again? I want to start by really giving a lot of credit and a lot of appreciation to the great people I've worked with throughout my career. I just feel so fortunate to have rubbed shoulders with some of the very, very brightest minds, and for whatever good I have done throughout my career, it's really just in relation to the people that I've worked with. I love the element of team. I love the element of collaboration and working together. And so what you're seeing here on the screen is really the culmination of really years of work and an organization of how businesses see technology. And even Brad, I think I shared with you early on, there's organizations out there that, even being taught at some of the top tech schools around, how business organizes technology. I've seen some of these frameworks have as many as 80 components, which, I love
Well,
your,
that simplifies life. Yeah.
I love
80.
your laugh for lots of reasons, Brad, but truly, that's the thought that
Give me
goes
a
through my
break.
mind. Like 80 components, how on earth could an executive,
That would overwhelm me.
that it's non-technical, make sense of that? And so, and I've also seen some frameworks that are more simple, too simple, and that can be
It's hard
problematic.
to find the balance,
Yeah.
but I think you found it.
So this really is what we feel like the sweet spot. These 9 areas. So far, the framework's holding up really, really well, and we're always open and want to stay humble that if we've missed something or if we need to adjust, we'll do that over time. But we really feel like so far all elements of the technology landscape can be organized under one of these 9 areas. And the way that we use it, if you think about it in the context of communication and making sure that both the non-technical executive and the technical leader are able to communicate, it gives a common language. And then, thank you, Brad. And then what we do is we take each of the areas, and just for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into all the details, but we essentially, you can kind of imagine, even if you're not technical, you can imagine In operations and infrastructure, you're going to see things like a data center and servers. If you're starting to modernize, you're going to see cloud, you're going to see AWS or Azure. You're going to see how those infrastructural components are there and supporting your business. That's a sometimes just that one box, operations and infrastructure, truly might be the largest single budget line in your entire company. And to your point, Crystal, I love how you said it. Most leaders, most CEOs, COOs, CFOs come from a very strong business background. Most have MBAs. Most have, very, very deep financial understanding. And so inside of an organization, if you can imagine just for a moment, just play this game with me. If somebody in the finance department who's handling accounts receivables on a whim decided, you know what, we're going to change up our accounts receivables process. How quickly do you think that would land on the seat of the CFO or the CEO?
Very quickly.
Those individuals would very quickly sit up and say, whoa, hold on a second. You're going to change what? Because they would recognize the implications that would have on the operations of the company. But yet, the financial impact of operations and infrastructure alone will
On the
actually,
technology side,
on the technology side, but for the business, will oftentimes have as much or greater impact.
it's not just an IT, like you said.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
And so it's not that as a non-technical person leading a company, you have to understand all the nuance of the cloud or data centers or servers. You don't have to know that. But
Thank goodness.
but you have to have a common language
Yeah.
to work with your tech leader to understand how
Well,
it's being used strategically.
and the rest of the leadership team and the board,
Yeah.
And the simple paradigm of green, yellow, red is so powerful for me as a CEO or a leader, leadership team member to be able to just see that snapshot. And I know we don't have time today to go into level 2 and level 3 of the framework, but just to be able to see where we're ahead, where we're behind, and where we're in trouble, it's
Yeah.
just it's super powerful.
And
Those
I love,
billions of
yeah.
different variables.
And I love your perspective, Brad. As a business person, you
Yeah,
often,
you
for
need
us,
this clarity.
yeah, you're the voice of many CEOs. I mean, you provide that view of, yep, this is making sense. If you can imagine, though, this type of dashboard being used by the C-suite, and you have one of the individuals at that table who has their passion project, their idea that they are just so wanting to be in the budget next year, putting this in front of that team and to quickly recognize what you're asking for is in an area that's at least yellow. Can we agree that we've got to move the two red from red to yellow before we fund your project? That creates executive alignment.
Priorities,
It creates priority,
clarity.
clarity.
Decision making.
Yeah, so that there
Good
isn't,
decision
it's
making.
not a personal decision, it's a business decision. It's we are doing this in the best interest of moving an organization forward in the right way. And so to connect back to your earlier question, Crystal, when you think about change and you think about what advances are happening in technology, the C-suite especially need to get to a place where they can confidently stand in front of their organization and express with authenticity the why we need to do X, Y, or Z, why we're going to spend less in one area and more in another, because that begins to invite the individuals that are going to come along, that invites them to be part of that, so that their voices are heard, that they're actively engaged in moving that priority forward in the way that the company needs.
I have a question for
Yeah.
you. Do you mind, and I'm springing this on you, but you've got so many examples of this, so many stories in your hard drive. I just wonder if you could tell us an example of a company that got on track with something like, I know your experience, for example, with Zero Res or companies like that. Is there a way to
Yeah.
sort of
Um,
bring us a story, bring this to life a
Yeah,
little
I
bit?
appreciate that, Brad. I really have loved the progression of my career and the places where I've had opportunities to make a difference. I'm going to really zoom in on business process optimization. When we put that particular component in the framework, that one of the 9, when it made it into this list, I want to be very deliberate. It's not that technology owns business processes. We respect that finance is going to own finance processes, sales will own theirs, marketing, support, and so forth. But this framework allows the technical group to be able to step in, shadow, watch, observe those business processes to ensure that technology is being used in the right way. A number of years ago, I worked for an organization where, on a quarterly basis, with thousands of clients, they were doing a review with these clients. And over time, because of some politics in the organization, the group that was doing these quarterly reviews had built up expertise in their area to do SQL queries to pull the data in preparation for the quarterly review. Over time, that cost had moved into north of $1 million per year just to support building that data. When we stepped in with me and my team, a couple of analysts, and we observed it, very quickly we realized all we had to do was add a couple of components that only cost about $30,000 to build, and it completely operationalized how that data was being pushed into those quarterly reviews. You can't imagine the kind of freedom that created for that team to have new budget to work with. Thankfully, those individuals didn't lose their job. They actually got redeployed in other parts of the business. But from a cost savings perspective, it created operational efficiency.
$1 million down to
yeah,
60 grand.
Yeah. And that's an example of business process optimization. So I love that you sprang that question on me. I could sit and tell stories all day.
You could. That's why I said that.
And I love that. So yeah, but that's just an example of where we would kind of use this framework. And this will definitely serve as a backdrop for so many conversations we'll have as part of this webinar series to help orient both technical and non-technical people
And you
around
use
this.
the framework, Crystal.
Yes, I was going to say we're an
Yeah,
example
please
of
tell us
using
that.
that, and I can't tell you the peace and comfort that talk about comfort earlier on.
Yeah.
It does bring a peace and comfort to be able to feel like you're seeing what you need to see. It's easier to make decisions, and this confidence that you have that you're investing in the right places, and that investment's not going to hurt you but pay off.
It's an extra layer of control.
Yeah.
You'll never have control, quote unquote, but you've got a little bit more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we have covered so much today, a lot. We've from the nature of that accelerating change to the role we play as leaders in navigating it. We've got a little bit of time. I'd love to talk with some of those on the webinar. I guarantee you all of them are dealing with change as well. So I'd love to hear their thoughts and experiences and questions around it. So if you have any of those, raise your hand or put it into the QA section, and our awesome help Alan will let us know. Our moderator Alan will let us know.
Okay.
Hello, Joseph.
Hey, thanks for letting me ask a question here today. So I just had a quick question about risk, because I think you guys kind of hit on the idea that there is risk in us not making movement, like not adopting new technology. But how as leaders should we be thinking about the risk of adopting new technologies versus not? And how do we communicate that with our teams?
That is a wonderful question,
Yeah.
Joseph. One of you two want to take the first stab at that?
Sure, I'll jump on that. Well, first of all, I would say that going back to something you said earlier, Crystal, the risk is always there.
Yes.
And not making a decision is itself a decision. And I use a questionable metaphor. I say, we could sit there in our dirty diaper and do nothing. But you know what? The world is going to pass us by, and it's passing us by so much faster today. The century between 1700 and 1800, that 100-year span, we're seeing the same amount of change probably every 2 years, maybe even less today. So you can sit there with your buggy whip and not make those decisions. So that's the first thing that you need to know about risk when you're dealing with change. The second thing is if it is a standard part of your management process, a standard part of your strategic planning, a transparent element of the communication, both up to the board and down to the employees throughout the company. It becomes part of the conversation. And you mentioned a minute ago that we are a technology company, and that's very true. And I would argue that every company is a
It's a tech-
technology company
exactly.
today. So as a business nerd, I would say that, making this a fundamental part of the strategic planning process, of the communication process. Obviously, we have to build budgets and, plans, forward-looking roadmaps for investment, but it's huge. And then we have to, again, help the people in our orbit deal with the ambiguity and find that through line.
Yeah, one of the ways I look at risk with regard to technology advances and move like building a system or implementing a system, integrating systems, the risk is definitely always there. Every business leader understands that in order to be in business, you're always taking some risk.
That's entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
That's the definition.
exactly.
Yeah.
You're going to always put your neck out there just a little bit. The Gallup poll, in the context of leading people, learned years ago that when you focus on the negative, when you focus on the issues,
Negative outcome.
the negative outcome, you actually will have the negative outcome.
Yeah.
So in leading people, if I focus on individuals' weaknesses, it actually accentuates them. And so the inverse, obviously, is what you want as a leader. If I'm working with somebody, I want to highlight and really create a lot of communication and appreciation and everything around their strengths. And by focusing on their strengths, you actually it negates or kind of draws down their weakness. Well, the same is true in risk. And so while it's important to identify risks as you move forward, focus on the vision, focus on where you're going. Yes, definitely keep an eye on those risks. Definitely recognize that there's certain things that are going to pop up from time to time. I'm a big proponent in the cybersecurity world of having, if you kind of use the cliff metaphor, you want a good fence at the top to prevent you from falling off. But if that fence fails, I want an ambulance down below to catch me. I want both of those to occur. Once you've got both those in place, the ambulance that's ready and the fence at the top, then go to work. Keep things moving forward. That's your best mechanism for actually managing risk is be aware of it, but don't hyper focus on it. Hyper focus on the vision.
I love that. For me, I definitely go back to if you have the right people, the right mindset, the right culture, you're going to hear the things you need to see. You'll be able to adapt quickly through that. And yeah, the risk is always going to be there. It's far riskier not to move. So
Great question.
I wish we had time for more. We are out of time.
Are we?
Yes. And this is a good reminder. If we could go to the slide, Brad, of for our executive roundtable. We go through so much in these, and it's such great topics. And we're going to start an executive excellence roundtable so that we, as leaders, can get together and more intimately have these conversations and dive even deeper into the conversations we're having in these webinars and even more.
Support one another.
Yeah, support one another. I have had so much value in being able to collaborate with other leaders in the roundtables I've been in. And so I'm really excited to be able to do that with more leaders and more diversity. A lot of my roundtables are within just my industry, and to have that diversity will be fun. So if you're interested in being part of that, you can scan the QR code and get more information. Finally, I want to thank you, Mel, Brad, thank our IT team and our marketing team for all the help that they did.
Thanks, Alan.
Yeah, thanks, Alan.
And thank all of you for joining us. I'm hoping that you can all join us again on November 21st at noon for our next webinar. And in the meantime,
Noon Mountain Time, right?
Mountain Time, yes,
Yeah,
noon
Mountain
Mountain Time. And let's continue thriving together with accelerated change. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.